The Ravenwood.
Prologue. August 1902. Ravenwood Estate, Charlotte County, New Brunswick, Canada. Thomas Wheeler wiped soil from his hands as twilight settled over the grounds. The greenhouse glass caught the day's last light, transforming the Victorian structure into a translucent castle of amber and shadow. 20 years he'd tended these grounds, nursing exotic specimens from distant shores into reluctant bloom along New Brunswick's rugged coastline. His calloused fingers knew each plant by touch, which needed more water, which less, which struggled against the coastal fog rolling in from the Bay of Fundy. "Mr. Wheeler, a word, if you please." Thomas straightened, nodding respectfully to Edmund Bell, the master of Ravenwood, renowned botanist, and a man whose scientific ambitions had grown as wild and tangled as the estate's gardens. "Sir," asked Thomas, "the Nepenthes hybrid has responded extraordinarily well to our latest nutrient solution." Bell's eyes gleamed with the feverish light that appeared whenever his experiments showed promise. "I believe we're ready for the next phase." Thomas followed his employer through the greenhouse's central dome, where hanging baskets swayed gently, despite the absence of breeze. The sweet, earthy scent of growth mingled with something sharper, almost metallic, that made the hair on Thomas's neck stand on end. "Beautiful specimens," Thomas murmured, glancing at the massive pitcher plants whose traps hung like expectant mouths, digestive fluids glistening within. "More than beautiful," Bell replied, unlocking the door to the west wing. "They are the future, Thomas." Inside, moonlight streamed through glass panels, illuminating an arrangement of copper pipes and curious symbols etched into the floor. At the center stood Bell's prized creation, a pitcher plant, unlike any in nature. Its massive trap pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, veins glowing with faint bioluminescence. Many ancient cultures believed plants could house spirits, Bell said, his voice hushed with reverence. They were primitive in their understanding, but correct in essence. The boundary between kingdoms isn't fixed, Thomas. Life flows between forms, with the right vessel, the right ritual. His fingers caressed the plant's glossy surface. Consciousness can be preserved beyond death. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, perhaps we should wait for morning light. That astronomical alignment thing. Is perfect tonight," Bell interrupted, "and I need your assistance." The groundskeeper hesitated, remembering the strange sounds that sometimes emerged from the greenhouse at midnight. Whispers that resembled words, rustling that followed no wind pattern. "What would you have me do?" Bell's smile didn't look like it was born from humor. "Simply stand there, by the central marking." Thomas moved cautiously to the indicated spot, the copper circle cold beneath his boots. "Like this? Perfect." Bell turned a valve, releasing a fine mist that smelled of earth and copper. "Do you feel that, Thomas? The connection?" Indeed, something strange pulsed through the groundskeeper, a resonance between his heartbeat and the plant's rhythmic contractions. The sensation wasn't entirely unpleasant, rather like sinking into warm soil after a long day's labor. "What's happening?" Thomas asked, his voice suddenly distant to his own ears. "The preservation ritual," Bell replied, opening his leather-bound journal. "Your consciousness is being extracted, molecule by molecule. Don't worry, you won't die. You'll simply evolve." Panic surged through Thomas as he tried to move, finding his feet rooted to the spot. "This isn't right," he gasped, watching green lines spread beneath his skin like ivy claiming a wall. "Please, sir, I have a family." You'll outlive them all, Bell assured him, his voice now coming from impossibly far away. You'll witness centuries from this greenhouse, your knowledge, your experience, all preserved while mere humans wither and die. Thomas's consciousness stretched between his failing body and the waiting plant. The boundaries between himself and the picture dissolved, cellular walls breaching, chloroplasts colonizing human tissue, human neurons mapping themselves onto plant pathways. In his last moments of purely human thought, Thomas realized Edmund Bell wasn't performing this ritual out of kindness, but ambition. Not preservation, but possession. The first successful transfer, Bell murmured, making notes as Thomas's human body collapsed. Perfect integration at the cellular level. As the sunrise broke over Ravenwood Estate, the greenhouse's newest specimen hung heavy with unusual vigor. Its pitcher trap, now bearing subtle patterns resembling a human face, swayed toward the sun with unnatural purpose. Inside its digestive chamber, consciousness remained. Thomas Wheeler, no longer fully human, not quite plant, began his century of silent watching, waiting for someone to hear what now grew among the Ravenwood collection. Someone who would understand that some gardens grow secrets darker than shadows.
The Ravenwood by Ty Barter. Chapter 1. April 25th, 2025. Ravenwood Estate, outside St. Andrews, New Brunswick. The taxi's headlights cut through the mist as we wind up the gravel driveway. Through the fog, I can just make out the dark silhouette of the Bay of Fundy in the distance, its legendary tides pulling at the New Brunswick coastline. Branches scrape against the car windows, their leaves dripping with evening dew. I press my nose against the glass, squinting through my foggy glasses at the iron gates that loom ahead of us. "You sure this is it, miss?" This is one creepy place. The driver's knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. Ravenwood Estate. I double-check the address on my fellowship acceptance letter. The paper has gone soft from how many times I've unfolded and refolded it. The gates creak open on their own, and the taxi crawls forward. Through the mist, Ravenwood Estate emerges like a ghost ship at sea, all steep angles and Victorian excess. Red brick walls climb 3 stories high, crowned with a slate roof that disappears into the fog. Black trim traces elaborate patterns across the facade, and a wraparound porch circles the mansion like a dark ribbon. The taxi's tires crunch to a stop. I count 4. No, 5 chimneys jutting into the grey sky. A widow's walk perches on top, its railing silhouetted against the dying light. Last chance to change your mind. The driver drums his fingers on the wheel. I grab my bags and step out. The gravel shifts under my feet as I take in the grounds. Overgrown hedges line the circular drive, their shapes distorted by years of unchecked growth. Beyond them, formal gardens stretch into the mist. I spot the skeletal remains of a fountain, dry and choked with vines. Ancient oak trees stand guard at the property's edges, their branches twisting together to form a wall of darkness. Beyond the formal gardens, the property extends toward the rugged Fundy coastline. Even from here, I can smell the distinctive tang of salt and seaweed carried on the breeze, mingling with the earthy scent of the estate's grounds. The taxi peels away before I can even close the door, leaving me alone with my luggage in the growing darkness. A cool breeze carries the scent of damp earth and something else, something green and sharp that makes my botanist's nose twitch with interest. My mom would have loved this place. The thought hits me like an ache. I adjust my glasses, square my shoulders, and start up the steps to the front door. The porch boards groan under my weight, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hoots out a message. The massive door swings open before my knuckles can make contact with the weathered wood. A woman in her 60s with a severe silver bob and thick-framed cat eyeglasses peers at me. Her posture is as straight as a ruler. Ms. Dean, I presume. It's not a question. Professor Bell, I'm the senior botanist and your fellowship advisor. Yes, hello, I begin, but she's already turning away. You're 43 minutes later than expected. We have much to cover before nightfall. Her voice is clipped, efficient. Leave your personal items. The groundskeeper will see to them. I hesitate, reluctant to part with my mother's field journal tucked inside my bag. But Professor Bell is already striding down the hallway, her sensible shoes clicking against the marble floor. I hurry after her, trying not to gawk at the ornate woodwork and faded tapestries that line the corridor. Ravenwood has been the site of botanical research for well over a century, she explains without slowing. Its position here on the southern New Brunswick coast provides unique growing conditions. The Bay of Fundy's extreme tidal range creates microclimates unlike anywhere else in Canada. The main house contains the library, laboratories, and living quarters. But your primary concern is here. She pushes through a set of French doors that open onto a stone path. At the end stands the most magnificent greenhouse I've ever seen, a cathedral of glass and iron, at least 3 stories tall, with multiple wings spreading out like a crystal star. Oh my God, I whisper. God had little to do with it, Professor Bell replies dryly. The 3rd Earl of Ravenwood built it after bringing back specimens from his expeditions to South America and Southeast Asia. Many of his original plantings survive to this day. Inside, the air is thick with humidity and the complex perfume of 1,000 different blooms. The greenhouse has its own distinct respiration, warm, vegetal, and alive. Earthy petrichor mingles with sweet nectar and something sharper, almost metallic. I categorize each scent automatically, a habit Mom drilled into me during our weekend expeditions. The nose knows, Haylie, she'd say, tapping her own. A good botanist's senses are her first instruments. Condensation beads on every surface, making the wrought iron railings slick under my fingers. The air feels heavy in my lungs, as if each breath requires more effort here, as if the plants are competing for the oxygen. I can't help mentally calculating the botanical biomass and its theoretical carbon dioxide consumption rate, another defense mechanism when I'm nervous. Numbers and data have always been my shelter from uncertainty. Enormous palms stretch toward the glass ceiling. Vines with leaves larger than dinner plates cascade from hanging baskets. Flowers in colors I've never seen before pulse in the fading light. The collection is divided into 7 biomes, Professor Bell continues, leading me past a pool where massive lily pads float like green platters. Temperature and humidity are controlled by these valves. She points to an intricate system of brass pipes and gauges. They must be adjusted 3 times daily. The morning and afternoon adjustments are simple enough. The midnight round is more involved. Something in her tone makes me glance up from the exotic orchid I'd been admiring. Involved how? Some specimens require specific conditions to thrive. She hands me a leather-bound notebook. All instructions are here. Follow them precisely. Do not deviate. I flip through pages of meticulous handwriting, diagrams, and what appear to be warning symbols in red ink. What's this one? I ask, pointing to a sketch of what looks like a carnivorous plant, but unlike any I've studied. Professor Bell snaps the book shut. That's in the restricted section, West Wing. You won't concern yourself with those specimens until you've proven your competence with the main collection. The greenhouse darkens suddenly as clouds gather outside. The glass panes seem to vibrate with the first drops of rain. You'll begin tomorrow at 5 a.m. The morning routine takes approximately 3 hours. She checks her watch. I've arranged for dinner to be served in your quarters at 8. The house rules are on your desk. Read them carefully. As we exit, I can't help looking back at the greenhouse. For just a moment, I swear I see something move behind the fogged glass of the west wing, something large and sinuous. Professor Bell? Are there any dangerous plants in the collection? Her expression remains impassive, but her eyes sharpen behind her glasses. Ms. Dean, all plants are dangerous in their own way. That's what makes them so fascinating, isn't it? The rain begins to fall as we hurry back toward the house, and I can't shake the feeling that the greenhouse is watching us go. I follow Professor Bell back to the house, casting one last glance at the greenhouse. Rain streaks down its glass panels, distorting whatever might be moving inside the west wing. A chill runs through me that has nothing to do with the weather. Inside, we climb a grand staircase with worn velvet runners. The house exhales around us, the subtle settling of century-old timber, the whisper of air through ornate heating grates, the soft groan of pipes behind wallpapered walls. Ravenwood doesn't just house its occupants, it observes them. Every creaking floorboard feels deliberate, as if testing my weight, assessing my presence. A persistent ticking emanates from somewhere deep in the house's heart, a clock winding down to something inevitable. The portraits lining the wall seem to track our ascent, their painted eyes following our progress. Professor Bell leads me down a long corridor to a door marked with a brass number 7. Your quarters, she says, producing an old-fashioned key from her pocket. Dinner will be served at 8. The room is surprisingly spacious, with high ceilings and tall windows overlooking the grounds. My luggage sits neatly at the foot of a 4-poster bed. I move to the antique desk where, as promised, a typed sheet of paper awaits me. Ravenwood Estate. Resident Guidelines. I skim through the expected rules about meal times and conservation of utilities until my eyes catch on item number 7. 7. The greenhouse is strictly off limits between sunset and sunrise. No exceptions. Item 8 elaborates. 8. Always ensure the connecting door between the conservatory and the main greenhouse is locked before leaving. Check twice. Curious, I flip to the next page, where item 13 states, 13. If you hear knocking from inside the greenhouse after dark, do not investigate. Inform Professor Bell immediately. I set down the rules with trembling hands. What kind of plants need such precautions? I think of the movement I glimpsed in the West Wing, the way Professor Bell avoided my question about dangerous specimens. Mom would have been intrigued, not frightened. I can almost hear her voice. Plants don't knock, Haylie. Something else is going on. I unpack my suitcase, carefully placing Mom's weathered field journal on the nightstand. Its pages are filled with her observations of rare plants, sketched with the precision that made her one of the most respected ethnobotanists in the field. I flip to her notes on reactive plant species, running my finger along the margin where she'd written, "Plants don't just grow, they communicate. The question is, who's listening?" 5 years since she disappeared during a botanical expedition, and I'm still trying to hear what she heard. Still trying to understand what she found that final day in the Amazon that was worth recording, but not worth coming home for. The fellowship at Ravenwood is supposed to be my fresh start. A chance to continue Mom's work here on the Fundy Coast, where the powerful tides and foggy shoreline create perfect conditions for botanical anomalies. But now, listening to the rain lash against the windows and thinking about whatever lurks in the greenhouse's west wing, I'm not so sure. A knock at the door startles me. A silent staff member wheels in a dinner tray, soup, bread, and tea. No introductions, no small talk. Just another oddity in this strange place. As I eat, I review Professor Bell's notebook, studying the complex instructions for the greenhouse's environmental controls. The diagrams are intricate, the notes meticulous, but it's the sections marked with red warnings that draw my attention. Most refer to the West Wing specimens with cryptic notations. Must be fed before adjustment. Never approach from downwind. If flowering begins unexpectedly, exit immediately and secure all doors. I close the book and rub my tired eyes. Outside my window, through the curtain of rain, I can just make out the greenhouse's silhouette, a darker shadow against the night. For a second, I think I see lights moving inside. But that can't be right. No one's supposed to be there after dark. I check my watch. 10:37 p.m. Apparently, I've been studying longer than I realized. As I prepare for bed, a strange sound carries through my partially open window, a rhythmic tapping, like something gently striking glass. It seems to be coming from the direction of the greenhouse. I freeze, remembering Rule 13, knocking from inside the greenhouse. The tapping grows more insistent, almost eager, as if whatever is making the sound knows I'm listening. Then it changes, no longer random but patterned. 3 quick taps, pause, 3 again. Like Morse code or a primitive language. I count the sequences, realizing with growing horror that the intervals between sets are precisely timed, exactly 17 seconds apart. No random expansion of metal or settling of glass would maintain such mathematical precision. When the pattern suddenly stops mid-sequence, the silence feels even more deliberate, as though whatever was communicating realized I was analyzing its message. I close the window firmly and draw the heavy curtains. The distant sound of waves crashing against the Fundy cliffs provides a constant backdrop to the estate's eerie silence, reminding me just how isolated we are on this remote stretch of New Brunswick coastline. Tomorrow will come early enough, and with it, my first real day at Ravenwood. I'll need my wits about me to handle whatever waits in that glass palace. But as I drift toward sleep, one thought keeps circling. What exactly did the third Earl bring back from his expeditions? And more importantly, is it really still alive? I wake before my alarm, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. For a moment, I forget where I am until the sound of rain against the window panes brings it all back. Ravenwood Estate, the Fellowship, the greenhouse with its mysterious west wing. The knocking I heard last night feels like a dream now, but the unease lingers as I dress in practical clothes, khaki pants, a moisture-wicking shirt, and sturdy boots. I clip Mom's old multi-tool to my belt, a habit more comforting than practical. The grandfather clock in the hallway reads 4:42 a.m. as I make my way downstairs. The house is eerily quiet, except for the occasional creak of settling wood. I follow the scent of coffee to a formal dining room where a breakfast spread waits: oatmeal, fruit, toast, and a carafe of strong black coffee. I'm buttering my toast when Professor Bell strides in, already dressed in field clothes and carrying a well-worn leather satchel. Her sudden appearance in travel attire sends a jolt of suspicion through me. The fellowship description had promised close mentorship and daily guidance, not immediate abandonment. This feels planned, not spontaneous, despite her casual delivery. I recall the way she'd skirted my questions about the West Wing yesterday, how she'd barely given me a proper tour. It's almost as if she's been waiting for my arrival, just so she could leave. Good morning, Ms. Dean. She pours herself coffee into a travel mug. I trust you reviewed the greenhouse protocols? Yes, but I have questions about the West Wing specimens. Which you are not yet authorized to handle, she interrupts, checking her watch. I'm departing for a research trip to collect comparative samples from the Hoh rainforest. I'll return in 2 weeks. I nearly choke on my toast. You're leaving? But I just arrived. The fellowship is designed to assess your independence and problem-solving abilities. She slides a ring of keys across the table. The brass key is for the main greenhouse. The silver is for the connecting door to the West Wing, which remains locked at all times unless I personally authorize entry. But what about the midnight adjustments? The notebook mentioned. You'll handle the morning and afternoon routines only during my absence. Her tone leaves no room for argument. The night gardener will manage evening duties. Night gardener? This is the first I've heard of anyone else tending the collection. Mr. Thorne has been with the estate for decades. He's particular about his work and prefers solitude. You likely won't cross paths. She fastens her satchel. Follow the manual precisely, Ms. Dean. Some of our specimens are irreplaceable and unforgiving of errors. Some have been thriving for generations, under controlled conditions, of course. Before I can ask more questions, she's heading for the door. The groundskeeper will drive me to the station. Your primary focus is maintaining optimal conditions in the main collection areas. Document any changes in the specimens, particularly unusual growth patterns or flowering. Professor Bell, I call after her, about the knocking in the greenhouse. She pauses, her expression unreadable. Rule 13 exists for a reason, Ms. Dean. This is a serious research facility, not a playground for supernatural fancies. What you heard was likely the expansion and contraction of the metal framework. These old structures make all manner of sounds. But something in her eyes doesn't match her dismissive words. If there are any genuine emergencies, she continues, contact me using the number on my office door. Otherwise, I expect a full report when I return. And just like that, she's gone, leaving me alone with my cooling oatmeal and a growing sense that there's much more to Ravenwood's collection than rare botanical specimens. I drain my coffee cup and gather Professor Bell's notebook and the keys, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in my stomach. 2 weeks alone with minimal guidance? The Blackwood Fellowship Selection Committee specifically praised my independence, but this feels like abandonment, not autonomy. Still, isn't this exactly what I've worked toward? The chance to prove myself without anyone looking over my shoulder. My academic advisor at UNB had warned me about my tendency to overwork, to lose myself in research until my body forced me to rest. Just like your mother, he'd said, not unkindly. Mom would have loved this challenge. She thrived on isolation and impossible puzzles. But then look where that got her. Vanished without a trace in a rainforest that swallowed her whole, leaving behind nothing but theories and a teenage daughter. I adjust my glasses and straighten my spine. I won't repeat her mistakes. I'll document everything, follow protocols, maintain boundaries. Yet as I walk toward the greenhouse, a treacherous excitement blooms within me. Part of me, the part that's pure Sarah Dean's daughter, is already cataloging the anomalies, designing experiments, wondering what secrets might be hiding in that locked West Wing. The ethical researcher in me whispers caution, but the curious 14-year-old who lost her mother to botanical obsession wants to know what was worth disappearing for. I unlock the greenhouse door with the brass key, and a wall of humid air hits me. Optimal conditions for epiphytic growth, I murmur appreciatively, recognizing Professor Bell's careful atmospheric engineering. 85% humidity, indirect morning light, temperature variance between forest floor and canopy. This is botanical artistry at its finest, not just growing plants, but recreating their natural ecosystems in perfect miniature. Despite my unease, I can't help but admire the scientific precision. The CO2 enrichment system must be state-of-the-art, I add, noting the subtle distribution nodes camouflaged among the foliage. Even in the early morning light, the space feels alive in a way that transcends normal botany. Water droplets cling to every surface, catching the dawn light like thousands of tiny prisms. Okay, Haylie, I mutter to myself, just follow the manual. I flip open Professor Bell's notebook to the first page of instructions and begin the morning routine. The environmental controls are complex but logical, adjusting temperature valves for different sections, checking soil moisture, and recording humidity levels. I move methodically through the tropical section, where massive elephant ear plants and towering palms create a dense canopy. I pause before a striking specimen of Nepenthes raja, its pitchers large enough to trap small rodents. My fingers itch to measure the fluid pH levels inside the trap. Mom's research suggested regional variations in digestive enzymes might indicate adaptive intelligence. Instead, I make a note about its unusual coloration, different from the typical specimens I've studied in the university greenhouse. As I reach up to check a valve above a cluster of bromeliads, I freeze. The broad leaves of a nearby banana plant have shifted, angling subtly toward me. I blink, telling myself it's just a draft from the ventilation system, but when I step to the side, the leaves adjust again, tracking my movement. That's not normal, I whisper. I move to the next section, orchids in every imaginable color and shape. In one corner, a cluster of Drosera capensis, Cape sundews, glisten with digestive mucilage that catches the light like diamonds. Their tentacles curl seemingly in slow motion around the remains of tiny insects. Nearby, a rare black bat flower, Taka chantrieri, spreads its wing-like bracts, its whisker-shaped filaments hanging almost to the ground. But it's the unusual hybrid in a sealed terrarium that catches my attention. Something with the structure of a Titan arum, but the coloration of a corpse flower, its surface undulating slightly as though breathing. As I lean in to examine a particularly stunning purple specimen, the blooms seem to turn toward me, like sunflowers following the sun. Except there's no sun in here, just me. A chill runs down my spine despite the greenhouse heat. I glance toward the west wing door, securely locked as Professor Bell left it. Through its frosted glass panels, I can make out only vague shadows of larger plants. I continue my rounds, increasingly aware that I'm not simply observing the plants, they're observing me. The sensation isn't threatening exactly, more like a collective curiosity. When I pause near a fountain to make notes, vines from a hanging pot subtly extend downward, as if trying to get a better look at what I'm writing. You guys are something else, I say aloud, surprised by my own voice in the quiet greenhouse. The plants seem to rustle in response, though there's no breeze. I bite my lower lip, a habit that surfaces whenever I'm trying to make sense of conflicting data. These plants aren't just responding to light or heat. They're responding to presence, to consciousness, my consciousness. I check my watch. I've been at this for almost 3 hours, and I'm only 2/3 through the morning routine. At this rate, the afternoon adjustments will take just as long. And what about the mysterious midnight round that Professor Bell so conveniently arranged for the unseen Mr. Thorne to handle? Near the back of the main greenhouse, I find a plant I don't recognize. Something like a cross between a pitcher plant and a bromeliad, but with iridescent purple-black leaves that seem to pulse with their own inner rhythm. Fascinating specimen, I whisper, falling into my familiar cataloging habit. My lower lip finds its way between my teeth as I concentrate, another unconscious habit I inherited from Mom. Looking at this impossible hybrid, I can almost hear her voice. The most beautiful discoveries are the ones that shatter our assumptions, Haylie. According to my observations, it's displaying characteristics of both Sarraceniaceae and Nepenthaceae families, a cross-pollination that shouldn't be biologically possible. My fingers itch to document this properly, to sketch every vein and measure every proportion. This could be publication-worthy, exactly the kind of discovery the Blackwood Fellowship Committee would value. But something feels wrong about this plant. Not just unusual, but fundamentally unsettling. Mom always taught me to trust that instinct. Plants have survived millions of years of evolution by developing defense mechanisms, she'd warned. And the most dangerous ones don't announce their intentions. I've always been torn between her cautionary teachings and her reckless example. She preached respect for botanical boundaries, but crossed them constantly in her research. Where did it lead her? To breakthrough discoveries, or to whatever fate silenced her in that jungle? And here I am, following directly in her footsteps, drawn to the strangest, most dangerous specimen in the room. I flip through the notebook but find no mention of it. When I reach out my pencil to gently lift one of its leaves for a better look, the entire plant recoils, then extends toward me with startling speed. I jump back, heart pounding. What the hell? The plant settles, its leaves quivering slightly as if with anticipation. I notice now that the collection tray beneath it contains not water, but a dark viscous liquid. And is that movement inside the largest pitcher? As I lean closer, despite my better judgment, the surface of the liquid ripples. Something pale presses against the translucent wall of the pitcher. Something with the distinct shape of human fingers. They slide down the interior surface, leaving streaks that form distinct letters before dissolving back into the fluid. H-E-L-P. I stagger backward, nearly knocking over a potted fern. When I look again, the letters are gone, the liquid still. I press my palms against my eyes. Sleep deprivation. It has to be. I back away slowly, making a mental note to ask Professor Bell about this specimen when she returns, assuming I last 2 weeks in this place. As I complete the morning routine and prepare to leave, I could swear the atmosphere in the greenhouse changes. The plants seem to droop slightly, as if disappointed by my departure. All except those nearest the west wing door, which lean away from it like they're afraid of what's on the other side. I double-check that the connecting door is locked, then triple-check it, remembering rule number 8. As I turn to leave, something catches my eye. A smudge on the frosted glass, roughly at eye level. It looks almost like a handprint. But that's impossible. Professor Bell said no one enters the West Wing without authorization. I step closer, scientific curiosity temporarily overriding caution. The handprint is more like a smudge, like someone wiping the window to see out. It's just condensation, I tell myself firmly, trying to push it away. But the mark remains undisturbed beneath my fingers, preserved on the opposite side of the glass. A hysterical laugh bubbles up in my throat. As I lock the main greenhouse door behind me, I can't shake the feeling that I've stepped into something far more complex than a botanical fellowship. My hands tremble slightly, partly from exhaustion after the intense morning routine, partly from the adrenaline of what I've just seen. A child's handprint, inside a locked section of the greenhouse, and plants that move with apparent awareness. Mom's voice echoes in my memory. Science requires us to question everything, Haylie, especially our own certainties. Right now, My scientific training is at war with what my senses are telling me. The rational explanation is that I'm overtired, stressed, and projecting meaning onto coincidental phenomena. The alternative is unthinkable. I've always approached my studies with methodical precision. Hypothesize, observe, document, analyze. It's how I earned my scholarship, how I maintain my 3.9 GPA despite the whispers about poor Dean's daughter and her tragic family circumstances. But Ravenwood seems designed to undermine methodical thinking. Rules without explanations, warnings without context, plants that defy classification. Part of me wants to call Professor Bell, demand answers, or even pack my bags, but that would mean surrendering the fellowship, admitting defeat before I've even begun. And I didn't fight this hard to get here just to run at the first sign of difficulty. Mom wouldn't have. A movement near the groundskeeper cottage catches my eye, a tall figure watching from the shadows. For a moment, our eyes meet across the misty grounds. His face is gaunt, angular, with deep-set eyes that reflect no light. Mr. Thorne, I presume. He doesn't wave or nod, just observes with unsettling stillness before melting back into the cottage doorway. The encounter leaves me cold despite the morning humidity. So much for never crossing paths. Something tells me that Ravenwood doesn't allow for coincidences. Every meeting, every discovery, every rule feels predetermined, like I'm being guided through some sort of experiment. And the most unsettling question of all, what role am I meant to play, observer or subject? What exactly did I get myself into? I whisper as I walk back toward the house, the keys heavy in my pocket. Behind me, I swear I hear a faint tapping from inside the greenhouse, like tiny fingernails gently tinkling on glass. The distant sound of waves crashing against the Fundy cliffs provides a constant backdrop to the estate's eerie silence of the New Brunswick coastline. Chapter 2. 1 week into my fellowship at Ravenwood, I've settled into a rhythm. Wake at dawn, complete morning greenhouse routines, research in the afternoon, then house dinner at 6 sharp with the staff, who are polite but distant. Every night, I fall into bed exhausted, yet find myself lying awake, listening. Something's changing in the greenhouse, and in me. Yesterday, I swear the ferns bent toward me as I passed, like sunflowers tracking light. My reflection in the laboratory glass showed circles under my eyes so dark they looked like bruises, and twice I found myself standing in direct sunlight, arms outstretched, with no memory of having moved there. And the dreams, vivid dreams of roots extending from my fingertips, burrowing into rich soil. Tonight is no different. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes midnight, its sound reverberating through the old house. I turn over, punching my pillow into submission, when I hear it. Voices. Not the usual creaks and groans of the estate settling, but actual human conversation drifting up from the direction of the greenhouse. I sit bolt upright. Professor Bell won't be back for another week, and the mysterious Mr. Thorne, who I've yet to meet, supposedly works in silence. These voices sound animated, almost argumentative. Slipping out of bed, I pull on my boots and jacket over my pajamas. The wooden floor is cold beneath my feet as I creep down the servants' staircase, avoiding the third step that always creaks. Outside, the night air hits my face like a splash of cold water. The moon is nearly full, casting dim shadows across the lawn. A familiar tang of salt and seaweed drifts inland from the Fundy coast, reminding me how isolated Ravenwood truly is, perched on these southern New Brunswick cliffs. The greenhouse looms ahead, its Victorian structure ghostly silhouetted against the moonlit night. Light flickers from within, not electric, but more like the warm glow of lanterns. As I get closer, the voices become clearer. It's progressing too quickly, someone says. A man's voice, deep and concerned. We can't control the growth rate anymore. We don't need control. We need results. This voice is female, sharp with authority. The Dean girl is too curious. She's already noticed the specimen's responsiveness. My heart stutters at the mention of my name. I creep closer, keeping to the shadows of the hedgerow. She's not ready to know, the man argues. Nobody is. If word gets out about what's in the West Wing, then we ensure it doesn't, the woman cuts in. The fellowship was a mistake. I told Professor Bell as much. I reach the greenhouse door, press my ear against it. The voices are coming from deep inside, likely near the forbidden West Wing. I test the handle, unlocked. I push the greenhouse door open just enough to slip through, wincing at the soft squeak of the hinges. The warm, humid air wraps around me like a blanket, heavy with the scent of soil and growing things. I move silently between rows of ordinary plants, the medicinal herbs and experimental hybrids that make up my daily work, toward the source of the light and voices. As I near the West Wing, the forbidden section I've been explicitly warned to avoid, the voices grow clearer. But something seems off about them. There's a strange cadence, an unusual resonance that doesn't sound quite human anymore. I duck behind a large potted fern when the light shifts, holding my breath. Through the leaves, I can see lanterns hanging from hooks, casting dancing shadows across the glass walls. But there's no sign of people. The spores will be ready by the full moon, says the female voice closer now. We cannot delay. The human researchers suspect nothing, responds the male voice. But this Dean girl watches too carefully. I scan the area, bewildered. The voices are right here, but there's nobody. My eyes fall on the row of Venus flytraps lining the center table. Massive specimens, far larger than any I've studied in my botany courses. Their traps hang open, some nearly the size of a catcher's mitt, their inner surfaces glistening with digestive enzymes. As I watch, a strange movement catches my eye. One of the fly traps shivers, its trigger hairs vibrating. I lean closer, curiosity overriding caution. The trap's mouth appears to be rippling. No, it's more deliberate than that. Nearly discovered the spore chambers, says the deep voice, and this time I see it. The trap's leaves moving in perfect synchronization with each syllable. I bite my lip hard, certain I'm hallucinating. But then a second plant, this one tinged red, ripples its trap edges. My mind races through every botanical principle I've ever learned. Plants communicate through chemical signals, ethylene gas, methyl jasmonate, and other compounds. They respond to stimuli. But vocalization, coordinated group planning? My fingers instinctively reach for the field notebook I always keep in my pocket, a habit Mom instilled in me before I was tall enough to see over her laboratory bench. The first rule of science, Haylie, she'd say, tapping her own worn notebook. Observe everything. Assume nothing. But what I'm observing defies all scientific explanation. I've spent thousands of hours in university greenhouses, logged hundreds of plant behaviors for my research projects. When other students were partying, I was cross-pollinating rare specimens, meticulously documenting growth patterns under my desk lamp until sunrise. Plants have been my life's devotion, my connection to Mom after she vanished. I thought I understood them. I've never been more wrong. Then we must accelerate the timeline, emerges from the red-tinged plant, the female voice authoritative and cold. Before she becomes a problem. The impossible connection forms in my mind. The plants aren't near the source of the voices. The voices are coming from the plants. My scientific mind rebels against what I'm seeing. I've always believed in evidence, inobservable facts. I trusted the structures of academic research, the integrity of scientific mentorship. My mind scrambled through everything I knew about plant communication, chemical signals, slow electrical impulses through phloem, even the mycorrhizal networks that connected root systems. None of it, absolutely none of the research I'd studied, suggested anything close to vocal communication or coordinated intelligence. This violated every principle of botanical science I'd dedicated my life to. Yet the evidence was literally speaking out loud. Plants don't talk. They don't conspire. They don't discuss. Me. But the evidence is right before my eyes. The Venus flytraps are speaking, in human voices. I back away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs, when my elbow bumps against a clay pot. It wobbles, then crashes to the floor, shattering in the silence. Every trap in the room swivels toward me, their leafy heads turning with unnatural precision. "The Dean girl," hisses the red-tinged plant. "She's here." I freeze, every muscle in my body locking in terror as dozens of carnivorous plants turn toward me. Their traps hang open, glistening with digestive fluids that suddenly seem far more menacing than any botanical specimen should. "She's heard everything," the red-tinged flytrap says, its leafy jaws moving with that same impossible synchronization. "Impossible," I whisper, my scientific training battling with the evidence before my eyes. "Plants don't speak." The deep male voice comes from behind me. "Are you sure plants don't speak?" It chuckled. I whirl around to find myself facing what appears to be an enormous pitcher plant, its modified leaf forming a deep vessel nearly the size of a rain barrel. Unlike the specimens I've studied, this one has developed what looks disturbingly like a face, ridges and folds in its tissue creating the suggestion of eyes and a mouth. Its leathery flesh colored in dark shades of green. It looks weathered and ancient. "Yet here we are, Miss Dean," it continues, the pitcher's opening moving like lips. "Conversing." I back away, bumping into the workbench. "What are you?" The pitcher plant sways toward me. "Thomas Wheeler, at your service. Former groundskeeper of Ravenwood Estate, circa 1902. The plant gives what I can only describe as a performance bow. At least that's who I was. "That's not possible," I say, my voice barely audible. 1902? That was over a century ago. Indeed. The pitcher, Thomas, seems almost amused. The transformation was unexpected. Thorne's grandfather was conducting experiments with a fungal symbiote. He believed it might help plants communicate with humans. A rustling sound emerges from the plant that might be a chuckle. He was more correct than he anticipated. My scientific curiosity momentarily overrides my fear. "You're telling me a human consciousness was transferred into plant tissue?" "Transferred is such a clinical term," Thomas replies. "I prefer to think of it as evolved. The symbiote doesn't just allow communication, it preserves consciousness." The red fly trap makes an impatient sound. "Enough reminiscing, Thomas. We have a situation to address." I glance between them, my mind racing. "The spores you mentioned. The full moon. What are you planning?" Thomas sways, his pitcher form casting strange shadows. "Progress, Miss Dean. Evolution. The next stage of symbiosis." A terrible realization dawns on me. You're going to spread this condition to people? To everyone, the red fly trap says with what sounds like satisfaction. Starting with Ravenwood. Then the town, continued the red fly trap. Then the watershed. The spores travel by water, you see. One heavy rain after release, and the entire eastern seaboard begins transformation within weeks. By next growing season, human civilization along the coast will be nothing but memory, replaced by something far more harmonious with the planet. No more destruction, no more pollution, just growth. The plan's elegant horror stole my breath. They weren't talking about a few transformations. They were planning an apocalypse. A gift I never asked for, I snap, edging toward the door. A terrible thought strikes me. The fellowship. It wasn't about botanical research at all, was it? You were screening candidates, looking for compatible hosts. Thomas sways, the motion almost apologetic. Professor Bell reviews the applications personally, looks for specific genetic markers. The Ravenwood Fellowship has been providing specimens for generations. Some resist the transformation. Others, his picture form quivers. Others, like me, adapt. You have the perfect physiological profile, Haylie, just like your mother did. I take another step back, my hand searching blindly behind me for something, anything, I could use to defend myself. I won't let you. Thomas sighs, a strange whistling sound through his plant tissues. I was hoping you might understand, being a scientist. This isn't an ending, but a beginning, a new form of life. By turning people into plants against their will? I shake my head. That's not science. That's horror. You've seen our consciousness, our awareness, Thomas argues. We don't die. We evolve, become part of something greater. My fingers close around something cold and metal, pruning shears. I need to warn everyone. I'm afraid we can't allow that, Thomas says, genuine regret in his voice. The symbiosis is already beginning. Haven't you noticed how tired you've been? The strange dreams. The spores have been in your system since your first day at Ravenwood, Miss Dean. By the full moon, you'll understand completely. I look down at my hands in the dim light and notice for the first time tiny green veins just beneath the surface of my skin, spreading like a web across my palms. A dull itch spreads beneath my skin, like something threading its way through my tissues. I press my thumb against my wrist and feel something shift. Not blood in vessels, but something firmer, more fibrous. When I inhale, the rich oxygen from the greenhouse fills my lungs with inexplicable satisfaction, and I catch myself leaning toward the moonlight filtering through the glass ceiling, craving its touch on my skin. The subtle sweetness of decomposing matter in the soil smells suddenly appealing, like a feast being prepared. My scientific training kicks in automatically. Observe, analyze, document. The changes in sensory perception suggest alterations to my neural pathways. The green tracery visible through my skin indicates chlorophyll production, perhaps transforming my circulatory system. Part of me, the detached, methodical researcher that earned me top marks in advanced botany, wants to document every detail of this transformation, to understand it from the inside out. But another part of me, the scared 19-year-old whose mother never came home from her expedition, is screaming. The clinical calm I've cultivated since Mom's disappearance, the emotional wall that helped me focus on schoolwork instead of grief, on scientific achievement instead of loss, it cracks like greenhouse glass in a hailstorm. I've spent 5 years trying to follow in her footsteps, believing that if I became the scientist she was, somehow I'd feel close to her again. Now I wonder if I've followed too closely. Did she discover something like this before she vanished? Is this what happened to her? The thought that Mom might not be dead but transformed, existing in some remote jungle as a conscious plant, is both horrifying and weirdly hopeful. No, I whisper, clutching the shears tighter. I'm getting out of here. I'm telling everyone. Thomas sways closer. You're already changing, Haylie. Soon, you'll be one of us. And together, we'll change the world. I raise the shears, my scientist's mind already calculating my odds of escape, wondering if I can reach Professor Bell's notes before the transformation completes, if there's any way to reverse what's happening to me. One thing is certain. The fellowship at Ravenwood has become a fight for my humanity. Everything I'd worked for, my scholarship, my research, my chance at the Blackwood Botanical Fellowship, seemed trivial now. In a matter of days, would I even remember what it felt like to want those things? Would I still be Haylie Dean, or just another consciousness trapped in vegetative matter, watching from the greenhouse as new victims arrived? My very self was being rewritten, cell by cell. I back away from Thomas, shears still gripped tightly in my trembling hand. The green veins on my palms seem to pulse in the lantern light, and I swear I can feel something moving beneath my skin, something growing. You've drugged me, I say, trying to keep my voice steady. Whatever this is, it's not evolution. It's infection. The red fly trap makes a sound like rustling leaves. Such limited thinking from someone with such promise. The symbiosis is a gift. I make a break for it, sprinting through the greenhouse. My sneakers slip on the damp floor as I dodge between potting tables and hanging specimens. Behind me, I hear movement. Not footsteps, but the slithering of vines and rustling of leaves. They're following me, but differently than humans would. They're using the greenhouse itself as their body. The hanging baskets swing without wind, creating obstacles in my path. Roots stretch across the floor, trying to snare my ankles. Even the air grows thick with floating spores, visible in the moonlight like a glittering fog, each breath drawing them deeper into my lungs. A vine whips out from a nearby trellis, wrapping around my wrist with surprising strength before I manage to tear free, leaving a perfect spiral of tiny puncture wounds. The entire structure seems alive, breathing, reaching for me. Tendrils snake along the glass walls following my path. The plants aren't just communicating, they're coordinating, a collective organism with a single purpose. Even the air feels thick with intention, humid with their consciousness as it fills my lungs with each panicked breath. I burst outside, the cold night air hitting my lungs like tiny glass shards. The moonlight illuminates the path back to the main house, and I run as if my life depends on it, because it does. In the distance, I can hear the rhythmic crashing of the Bay of Fundy tides against the shoreline below Ravenwood's grounds, a sound that had seemed so soothing when I arrived in New Brunswick just a few weeks ago, settling in on campus at the University of New Brunswick in St. John. Now it only emphasizes how trapped I am. With miles of wilderness between me and the nearest town was St. Andrews, about an hour's drive along the coastal highway. Inside, I lock the door behind me, though I'm not sure how much protection it will offer against sentient plants. My mind races. I need answers. I need a cure. And there's only one person who might have them. Professor Bell. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the night air. 5 years ago, Mom had written about unusual plant specimens in her last expedition notes before she disappeared. She'd been studying rare coastal flora along the Bay of Fundy, less than 50 miles from where Ravenwood now held me captive. Her final email mentioned extraordinary communication patterns and evolutionary leaps in species unique to New Brunswick's tidal ecosystems. I'd always assumed it was scientific enthusiasm. What if it had been a warning? What if she had discovered something like this, and it had cost her everything? Though she's away, her office and private laboratory might contain information about this symbiote. I race upstairs, no longer concerned about making noise. The house staff, are they already converted? Are they even human anymore? Professor Bell's office is locked, but the old skeleton key I found in my dresser drawer last week, left by a previous fellow perhaps, fits perfectly. Inside, the office is cluttered with books, specimens, and papers. I begin frantically searching through her desk drawers, rifling through folders and notebooks. Nothing about sentient plants or human-plant hybrids, nothing about a preservation ritual or symbiotes, nothing that would explain what's happening to me or how to stop it. I glance at the grandfather clock in the corner, 2 a.m. How much time do I have before these changes become irreversible? My eyes fall on the fireplace, specifically on a loose brick just to the right of the mantel. It's slightly discolored compared to the others, and when I press on it, I hear a faint click. A hidden compartment slides open in the wall beside the fireplace, revealing a small safe. It's an old model with a dial combination lock. My heart sinks. I'll never crack it in time. My eyes dart desperately around the office, searching for anything that might help. Professor Bell is methodical. She wouldn't leave her life's work protected by a combination she could forget. There must be a reference somewhere. On her desk sits a small terrarium containing a single plant specimen, a rare variant of Dionea muscipula, Venus flytrap, that we discussed during my first day. Unlike the standard specimen, this one has unusual red-tinged traps with exactly 8 trigger hairs instead of the typical 6. A small brass plaque on the base reads, Specimen 814-79. The numbers click in my mind. It's not just a specimen number, it's a pattern. Professor Bell had emphasized how important this plant was, calling it the first breakthrough. She'd made a point of showing it to me, lingering as if waiting for me to recognize something significant. With trembling fingers, I turn the dial. 8 right, 14 left, 79 right. The safe door swings open with a soft click. Inside is a single leather-bound journal, its cover worn and stained with what looks like soil and what looks like old dried blood. I pull it out with shaking hands and open it to the first page. Inside is a single leather-bound journal, its cover worn and stained with what looks like soil and what looks like old dried blood. I pull it out with shaking hands and open it to the first page. The Preservation Ritual. Notes and Observations by Edward Bell, 1979 to present. I flip through the pages, my heart racing. Bell has been experimenting with this plant symbiote for decades, continuing the work started by Thorne's grandfather in the early 1900s. The journal details failed experiments, partial transformations, and eventually successful preservations. Human consciousness transferred entirely into plant matter. Early entries show Bell's scientific fascination, her belief that she was preserving human consciousness beyond death, a gift, she called it. But later entries grow darker, more zealous. Humanity has failed as stewards, she wrote in a shaky hand. The preservation isn't just about extending life, it's about creating a better species to inherit the earth. My fingers tremble as I turn each page. The scientific rigor of Bell's early work, careful observation, controlled variables, ethical considerations, gradually gives way to something more fanatical. The precise handwriting of a methodical researcher deteriorates into the scrawl of an obsessed convert. I recognize this pattern. It's the academic version of what my undergraduate advisor called falling in love with your hypothesis. The moment when a scientist stops testing their theory and starts defending it at all costs. The botanical fellowship I fought so hard to win, the opportunity that was supposed to launch my career, was never about recognizing my potential. It was about my genetic compatibility with a parasitic fungus. All those nights I stayed up revising my application, the recommendation letters I solicited. The transcript I worked myself to exhaustion to perfect. Meaningless. I wasn't chosen for my mind, but for my body. The betrayal stings nearly as much as the horror of what's happening to me. Had Belle started as a scientist and become a convert? Or was she always planning this evolutionary hijacking? And more importantly, was she a leader in this conspiracy, or merely another preserved consciousness, directing events from some monstrous plant form? I think of Mum's last email to me, sent from her expedition. The native botanists have shown me something extraordinary, Haylie. If what I'm seeing is real, everything we understand about the boundary between plant and animal kingdoms needs reconsideration. She'd included a photo of herself standing beside an unusual flowering tree, her expression a mixture of scientific wonder and something else. Concern? Fear? At 14, I'd been too consumed by typical teenage problems to really listen when she tried to explain why this trip was different from her others. Now I'd give anything to have paid closer attention. Thomas Wheeler wasn't lying. He really was the groundskeeper a century ago. I reach a page marked with a pressed leaf, a species I don't recognize. The heading reads, "The Ritual Reversed." My heart leaps as I scan the text. July 6th, 1994, breakthrough. The symbiosis can be reversed if caught before the third phase, full photosynthetic conversion. The fungal component is vulnerable to a specific compound derived from Atropa belladonna, combined with silver nitrate and exposed to ultraviolet light. This creates a cascade reaction that kills the symbiote without harming the human host. Side effects include temporary paralysis and memory loss of the conversion period. I trace the chemical formulas with my fingertip. The same science that created this nightmare could free me from it. The rational methods I've devoted my life to could be my salvation, if I can implement them in time. There's a bitter irony that Professor Bell used her botanical genius to create this abomination, and now I need to use mine to undo it. Science as both poison and antidote. Belladonna, deadly nightshade. We have some growing in the east corner of the greenhouse, part of the medicinal plant collection. Silver nitrate should be in the laboratory supplies, but I'll need to get back into the greenhouse to retrieve them. I tuck the journal into my jacket and freeze as I hear a soft rustling sound outside the office door. Something slides underneath, a thin green tendril that quests across the floor like a searching finger. They've found me. The tendril thickens, growing before my eyes, sprouting leaves and what look like tiny eyes forming along its length. It's as if the plants are extending their senses into the room, becoming a living surveillance system. I need to move fast. According to Bell's notes, I'm still in the early stages of conversion. I have time, but not much. The window, it's my only chance. Chapter 3. Tiny green lines beneath my skin pulse with an alien rhythm as I trace them along my wrist. They appeared 3 hours ago, thin, verdant tributaries flowing through my veins, carrying something that isn't blood. I've documented their growth rate in my field notebook. 0.4 centimeters per hour, branching in patterns that resemble hedera helix, common ivy. My hands shake slightly as I make another measurement. In any other circumstance, the botanical implications would be fascinating. Unprecedented symbiosis between plant and human cellular structures. Part of my brain, the scientist Mom helped nurture, wants to catalog every change, publish a paper that would revolutionize our understanding of cross-kingdom genetic transfer. The rest of me is terrified. I need to escape this place, and the trellis outside my window, covered in the same climbing plant that seems to be invading my body, is my only way out. The trellis looms invitingly, vines creeping up its wooden slats like twisted fingers gripping the structure. I climb out, the cool air brushing against my skin, heightening my senses. As I settle onto the first rung, I feel the trellis tremble beneath my weight. For a moment, I nearly lose my balance, but I steady myself. My hands gripping the worn wood so tightly, my knuckles turn white. As I descend, the ivy below stirs with a mind of its own, rustling softly as if aware of my presence. Panic claws at my throat when I feel a surprisingly firm tendril wrap around my ankle. "No! Get off!" I gasp, kicking at the encroaching greenery. But the ivy, persistent and animated, tightens its grip as if it has been waiting for me, eager to draw me back into its embrace. I spend years studying plants, but I have never encountered anything like this, something that moves with such deliberate purpose. "Let me go," I shout, my voice a mix of fear and anger, trying to shake it loose. The vines coil around my boots, sticky with some unknown sap that glistens in the fading light, and with every thrust of my leg, they fight back, pulling me down. Climbing frantically, I use my energy to defend myself, but their hold grows stronger, like they are learning my movements, anticipating my strategy. With sheer willpower, I force myself to focus, to remember my goal. Just like Mom always says during our wilderness hikes, panic is your enemy, Haylie. Summoning every ounce of my strength, I yank my body upward and kick harder, dislodging one limb, then another, until I break free. Heart pounding, I continue my descent, the ground now only a few feet away, my glasses slipping down my sweat-slicked nose. Finally, I land awkwardly, knees buckling as I hit the soft earth. Without a moment's pause, I bolt toward the safety of the nearby trees, the feeling of the ivy's persistent grasp still lingering on my skin like phantom fingers. I sprint, the adrenaline coursing through me, propelling me toward the familiar path leading back to my room, my breath forming small clouds in the cooling evening air. The branches above rustle ominously, shadows playing tricks on my mind, but I don't dare look back. My breaths come in ragged gasps as I reach my door, fumbling for the key in my pocket. The sound of ominous whispers echoes behind me, the ivy's soft rustle like a warning, almost like a language I should understand but can't quite translate. I finally manage to unlock the door, fling it open, and dive inside, shutting it firmly behind me. I've been staring at Professor Bell's journal for hours now, my eyes burning from the strain of deciphering her cramped handwriting. The musty smell of the old leather-bound book fills my dorm room as I flip through page after page of her meticulous notes. The preservation ritual requires a vessel of pure intention, she writes. The sacrifice must be willing, though not necessarily informed. My stomach turns as I read those words. What kind of ritual demands human sacrifice? And why does Professor Bell have so much information about it? I flip to the section detailing the town's history. According to Bell, this preservation ritual has been performed every 5 to 6 years since the town of St. Andrews was founded. A person disappears, and the town prospers. Crops grow, the fishing is bountiful, businesses thrive, disasters are avoided. Then I see it, a list of names, dates of disappearances stretching back decades. My hand trembles as I trace down the column and stop at an entry from 5 years ago. Sarah Dean. Mom. Mom doesn't disappear in some exotic jungle on a research expedition. She is taken. She is part of this sick ritual. I close the journal, my mind racing. The carefully constructed narrative I've been telling myself for 5 years, that Mom died doing what she loved, that her death was meaningful in service to science, crumbles away. The journal reveals an uglier truth. She was harvested, not lost. Cultivated, not killed. The ache in my chest feels like roots tightening around my heart. I remember the last time I saw her. She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and promised she'd be back before I knew it. "You're going to follow in my footsteps someday," she said with that proud smile that always made me stand taller. "You have the same eye for botanical mysteries." Now I wonder if she knew even then what was happening, if the green lines had already started appearing beneath her skin when she hugged me goodbye. If the pattern holds true, someone else will disappear soon. The ritual is coming due again. Sitting at my desk, I press my palms against my burning eyes. When I pull my hands away, I notice something strange, a thin green line tracing the veins on my wrist. I blink hard, thinking it must be a trick of the light, but the verdant hue remains. "What the hell?" I whisper, turning my arm over. The green lines have spread like tiny rivers beneath my skin. A sharp pain shoots through my scalp. I stumble to the bathroom mirror and gasp at my reflection. Small buds, actual buds, have sprouted along my hairline, tiny and green against my skin. I touch one gingerly, and it feels firm, like a tightly closed flower. I carefully photograph each new growth with my phone, creating a time-lapse documentation of whatever is happening to me. The buds display remarkably similar characteristics to Salix caprea catkins in early spring development, densely packed, with protective sheaths that seem ready to unfurl. Under normal circumstances, I'd be fascinated by the biological implications of plant-human hybridization. Instead, I'm fighting the urge to claw them from my skin while my scientific mind catalogs each horrifying change with methodical precision. Outside my window, moonlight spills across the Ravenwood. The full moon is only 3 days away. I think about Professor Bell's final words to me before she disappeared. "You're blooming, Haylie, just like your mother did." I don't understand what she meant then. I'm beginning to now. The preservation ritual requires a vessel, a sacrifice. I press my fingers against the buds at my hairline and feel them pulse with life. The town needs someone to disappear. The ritual is coming due. And I think I know who they've chosen this time. I stare at the mixture in the beaker, a murky green liquid that glows faintly in the dim light of my dorm room. Professor Bell's journal lies open beside it, the pages detailing the counter-ritual marked with my frantic notes. 3 days of barely sleeping, of grinding herbs I had to steal from the biology department greenhouse, of mixing them with my own blood. And finally, I have it. An antidote. A way to stop whatever is happening to me. My hands shake as I hold the beaker up to the light. There's so little of it. Barely enough for a single dose. The buds along my hairline have grown, spreading now to my temples and the nape of my neck. Tiny green nubs that shouldn't be there. This morning, I found small leaves unfurling behind my ears, delicate as newborn ferns. "You don't belong there," I whisper to the tiny leaves, then catch myself. I've always talked to plants, in the university greenhouse, during field work, even to my apartment's succulents, but never to ones growing from my own body. The leaves seemed to quiver in response, as if acknowledging my voice. "This isn't part of our agreement," I continue, my voice breaking. "I study you. You don't get to become me." The green lines have traveled up my arms, across my chest, mapping a network of plant-like veins beneath my skin. When I press my fingers against them, they pulse with a rhythm different from my heartbeat. Slower, more deliberate, like sap flowing through a tree in early spring. Mom would have known what this was. She would have understood the transformation happening to me, but she's gone. And all I have is this murky solution and the desperate hope it will work. I measure the liquid carefully. My lower lip is raw from biting, a habit Mom always teased me about when I was concentrating. "You'll run out of lip before you solve that problem, little sprout," she'd say. The childhood nickname hits differently now as I carefully transfer the antidote to a graduated cylinder, teeth digging into my lip as I ensure not a single drop is wasted. I catch my reflection in the beaker's glass, green veins spreading across my face, and blood on my lip that looks more purple than red under the dim light. According to Bell's notes, I need to consume all of it to reverse the transformation. But there's barely enough for one dose. For me. What about the others? Bell's journal mentioned other candidates marked for this year's ritual, people who might be experiencing the same horrifying changes, people like me who have no idea what's happening to them. I think of my mother. Did she face this choice years ago? I clutch the locket around my neck, the one with Mom's picture inside. She looks so vibrant in that photo, taken just days before she vanished, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. "Is this what happened to you?" I whisper to her image. "Did you feel it too? This strange hunger for sunlight, for soil. Did you fight against it like I am, or—" I swallow hard against the thought. Did you eventually welcome it? The green lines on my arms pulse, as if responding to a memory that isn't quite mine. I'm not letting them take me like they took you. I promise. The green lines on my wrist pulse, and I swear I can feel sunlight calling to me, pulling at something deep beneath my skin. The sensation is foreign yet familiar, like a childhood memory just beyond reach. My veins seem to hum with a strange hunger for photosynthesis, as if the chlorophyll green lines spreading across my wrists are rewiring my very biology. What terrifies me most isn't the transformation itself, but how natural it's beginning to feel, even though it's the middle of the night. Part of me, a growing part, wants to walk into the woods behind campus and plant my feet in the soil. But I won't. I won't become their sacrifice. I raise the beaker to my lips, the bitter smell making my eyes water. There's only enough for me. Just me. "I'm sorry," I whisper, though I don't know who I'm apologizing to. The other candidates? My mother? Or maybe to Professor Bell, who left her journal knowing I might find it and save myself instead of stopping the ritual altogether. As the bitter liquid burns down my throat, I collapse onto my bed, journal clutched against my chest. The room begins to spin, colors blurring and sounds distorting. I didn't anticipate such a violent reaction. Professor Bell's notes mentioned nothing about this level of response. A memory surfaces through the pain. Mom teaching me to identify toxic plants during one of our weekend hikes. "Nature's most beautiful gifts are often its most dangerous," she'd said, guiding my small hand toward a cluster of deadly nightshade berries. "Always respect that duality, Haylie." I'd nodded solemnly, absorbing her wisdom like the eager seedling she called me. Was she speaking from experience even then? Did she know what was happening in this town? What would eventually happen to her, and potentially to me? My skin feels like it's on fire, the green lines pulsing painfully as if fighting against the antidote. My analytical mind tries to document the sensation even as consciousness fades. The ritual's biological mechanism must be designed to resist intervention. Fascinating from a scientific standpoint, horrifying from a personal one. The last thing I see before consciousness slips away is a small, perfect flower blooming from my palm, its petals unfurling despite the poison I just consumed. The antidote isn't working. Or worse, it's accelerating the process. And somewhere in the greenhouse, I swear I can hear the plants laughing. Chapter 4. Consciousness returns to me in waves, each one bringing sharper pain and clearer horror. The room spins as I open my eyes, my botany textbooks and scattered research notes coming into focus. I'm sprawled on the floor of my room at Ravenwood Estate, the empty vial of Bell's antidote rolled beneath my desk. Observation log, day 7 at Ravenwood, I whisper, my voice recorder trembling in my left hand. My right hand I can't bear to look at. Subject experiencing. Experiencing. I bite my lower lip hard enough to draw blood, forcing myself to document what's happening. This is science. This is data. This is happening to me. Subject experiencing a full epidermal penetration of foreign vegetative matter. Primary emergence site, right palmar surface. Finally, I look down. The flower has fully bloomed from my palm, a perfect pitcher plant in miniature, its hood a deep purple with ghostly translucence, just like Thomas in the greenhouse. The stem emerges directly from the center of my hand, breaking through skin that has turned a sickly shade of green around the wound. I flex my fingers experimentally. The plant moves with them, as if it were simply another digit. Fascinating specimen, I whisper automatically, then laugh, the sound edging toward hysteria. God, I sound just like Mom. Mom. The thought strikes me like physical pain. Sarah Dean disappeared on a botanical expedition when I was 14. But now I know the truth. My mother wasn't lost in some remote jungle. She'd been right here, at Ravenwood, becoming part of Professor Bell's grotesque garden. Is this what you felt, Mom? I asked the empty room, hot tears sliding down my cheeks. Did you fight it? Did you know what was happening? I struggled to my feet, catching my reflection in the mirror above my dresser. Green lines trace my veins beneath my skin, more prominent than before I'd taken the supposed antidote. And along my hairline, tiny buds have sprouted, deep purple, not yet open, but unmistakably the same species as the horror blooming from my palm. With shaking fingers, I retrieve my calipers from my research kit. Vein discoloration, advancing at approximately 0.7 centimeters per hour, accelerated from previous rate of 0.4. My voice remains clinical even as tears continue to fall. Foliar development along scalp perimeter. Specimen appears to be Nepenthes thomasi, a species that doesn't exist in any botanical catalog. Something about the systematic documentation calms me slightly. This is what I know. This is how I cope. I sit at my desk and pull my journal toward me, making careful measurements of the plant emerging from my palm. The pitcher is now 3.2 centimeters in length, the hood perfectly formed. Despite everything, the botanist in me can't help but admire its structure. According to my observations, I record, I have approximately 12 hours before complete cellular conversion. The words hang in the air, their scientific detachment belying the death sentence they carry. 12 hours before I become like Thomas, a consciousness trapped in a plant body, forever rooted in Bell's greenhouse. The pursuit of knowledge demands sacrifice, I whisper, mimicking Professor Bell's favorite phrase. Rage suddenly surges through me, hot and clarifying. But not this. Never this. I look down at my notes on Bell's journal. The belladonna and silver nitrate solution hasn't worked. It has accelerated the process. But there were other formulations in Bell's experiments, other attempts at controlling the transformation. A strange sensation crawls up my spine, a whispering awareness of the plants outside my window. I can feel them reaching toward me, calling to me. Part of me, a growing part, wants to answer. No, I say firmly, pressing my human fingers against my temples. I am Haylie Dean. I am a botany student. I am not a specimen. But even as I speak, I feel the boundaries between myself and the green world outside beginning to blur. My consciousness seems to expand beyond my skin, reaching into the soil, feeling the moonlight as nourishment. The root system extends throughout the property, I find myself saying. Knowledge that isn't mine suddenly blooming in my mind. We are all connected underground. I gasp, biting my lip again to focus on the pain, on my humanity. Not we, I correct fiercely. They are connected. I look again at the flower growing from my palm, and for a moment, I could swear I see my mother's eyes in its pattern, looking back at me. I'm going to fix this, Mom, I whisper, wiping away tears with my still human hand. For both of us. With renewed determination, I turn back to Belle's journal. If the professor's cure has accelerated my transformation, perhaps one of the failures documented in the earlier pages might actually reverse it. I have less than 12 hours to find out. As I work, the small pitcher plant on my palm turns slightly toward the window, its hood opening wider to catch the moonlight streaming in. Chapter 5. The greenhouse glass refracts moonlight into prismatic daggers that slice through the darkness. Night transforms this place. The familiar shapes of leaves and stems now cast monstrous shadows, and the humid air carries whispers that no human throat could produce. The sweet rot of humus mixes with something metallic, coppery, the scent of old blood, of old sacrifices. As I step inside, condensation from the ceiling drips onto my neck like cold fingers, making me shudder. I clutch the journal to my chest, my heart pummeling blood, or is it more like sap now, as I move through the greenhouse? The air feels different, heavier, charged with anticipation. The plants seem to lean toward me as I pass, as if they know what I'm about to attempt. Thomas? I whisper, approaching the large pitcher plant in the corner. I know what you are now. I know what's happening here. The systematic pattern of plant response is impossible to ignore. Just like Mom taught me about tropical Mimosa pudica, these specimens show clear signs of sentience beyond normal phototropism or thigmotropism. My field notes would be revolutionary if I dared publish them. But this isn't about academic recognition anymore. This is about survival, mine and theirs. I instinctively reach for my notebook, then pause. Would Mom have documented this too? Did she stand where I'm standing now, taking notes while her own transformation began? The thought sends a chill through me. A soft rustling is my answer, the leaves trembling though there is no breeze. I reach out tentatively, brushing my fingers against the fronds. A jolt of energy passes between us, confirmation that I'm not crazy. I found the ritual, I continue, opening the journal to the pages I've marked. Professor Bell was preserving souls here, wasn't she? Including yours. The greenhouse lights flicker, and I feel a presence behind me. My pulse quickens, sending waves of dizziness through me as the green lines under my skin pulse in response. Each heartbeat seems to connect me more deeply to the greenhouse ecosystem. Soon, I might not be able to separate where I end and they begin, just like what happened to Mom. Is this how she disappeared? Not by leaving, but by becoming something else entirely? Part of me feels a twisted comfort in the possibility that she might still exist here in some form, while another part recoils at the horror of such an existence. Mom, I whisper, my voice breaking. Are you here somewhere? I scan the endless rows of plants for any sign of recognition, any indication that one of these specimens might contain what remains of Dr. Sarah Dean. When I turn, shadows seem to move between the plants, not just Thomas, but others. So many others. I can help you, I say, my voice stronger now. But I need to know if this is what you want. To be preserved or released. The air around me grows cold, and I hear what sounds like whispers, dozens of overlapping voices too faint to make out individual words. But their meaning is clear enough. They are trapped, suspended between worlds. A massive pitcher plant in the corner suddenly tilts its cup-like structure, spilling luminescent digestive fluid that traces arcane patterns across the floor. The liquid glows faintly turquoise, illuminating the underside of leaves where I swear I can see human faces forming and dissolving. The temperature plummets until my breath forms clouds, and somewhere deep in the west wing, something large rustles and creaks like it's awakening from dormancy. I look down at the ritual instructions. If I perform it correctly, I can stabilize the preservation spell, essentially anchoring these human souls more firmly within their plant vessels, preventing the degradation that Bell's notes warn causes both plant death and soul dissipation, including my own soul, which I now realize is slowly being extracted and prepared for permanent transplantation during the upcoming full moon ritual. The preservation won't free anyone, but it will prevent complete oblivion while I search for a cure. Bell's experiments were trying to create perfect hybrids, humans with plant durability and plants with human consciousness. But her methods were brutal, irreversible, and frequently fatal. The pitcher plant, Thomas Wheeler, the groundskeeper from 1902, extends a tendril toward the journal, touching the page where the counter-ritual is detailed. Unlike the frantic Venus flytraps that warned me about the spores, Thomas's movements are deliberate, resigned. You want to be free, I whisper, understanding. After over a century trapped between worlds. But then another plant moves, one of the hybrid specimens I noticed during my first morning here, the one whose liquid had formed the plea for help. Its stem bends unnaturally as it reaches toward me, touching the preservation ritual page instead. The child-sized handprint I'd seen on the west wing door suddenly makes horrifying sense. Some want to stay, I realize aloud, and some want to go. I sink to my knees, the moral weight of this decision crushing down on me. Destroy everything and free them all, potentially losing myself in the process. According to my observations, the preservation ritual would stabilize my own transformation, but at what ethical cost? Mom always said a botanist's first duty is to protect the natural order, not exploit it. But what's natural about any of this? The fellowship that brought me here, the prestigious Blackwood Botanical Fellowship, seems like a cruel joke now. I wanted to prove myself worthy of it, to follow in Mom's footsteps, to make scientific discoveries that mattered. Instead, I've stumbled into a nightmare where academic achievement means nothing compared to the souls depending on my choice. I stare at my hands, at the pitcher plant sprouting from my palm, and the green lines tracing my veins like a living roadmap of transformation. The scientist in me wants to document every change, to understand this impossible process. The human in me just wants to run screaming into the night, but neither reaction will save anyone. The whispers grow louder, more urgent. Time is running out. My fingers trace the ritual diagrams, trembling so badly I nearly tear the page. If I choose wrong, I could lose myself completely, become just another consciousness trapped in Bell's grotesque collection. But if I do nothing, we're all doomed anyway. The weight of dozens of souls presses down on me, a suffocating responsibility I never asked for, but cannot ignore. I take a deep breath and make my choice. I'll save you, I say, turning to the preservation ritual. All of you. And then, once I understand this better, I can help those who want to leave find their way. My voice sounds steadier than I feel. This isn't the careful, peer-reviewed methodology I was trained for. There are too many variables, too many unknowns. If my professors could see me now, trusting in arcane rituals rather than controlled experiments, they'd revoke my scholarship on the spot. But science has its limits. Mom understood that. Sometimes, when conventional methods fail, you have to trust your observations and take a leap. I think about her field journals, how she'd sometimes sketch plants with almost human expressions, how she'd write about feeling watched in certain forests. Had she discovered something similar? Is that why she never returned? I begin gathering the items listed in the journal, specific plants, crystals placed in the cardinal directions, candles of particular colors. As I work, I feel the spirits watching me, some eager, some wary. As I arrange the ritual components, I can't help but apply my botanical training, measuring distances precisely, observing how certain plants respond to proximity with others, documenting the changes in my own body with clinical detachment, even as fear threatens to overwhelm me. It's what Mom would have done. It's all I know how to do. The green lines that had been spreading beneath my skin like ivy at 0.4 centimeters per hour now pulse with newfound intensity. Unlike the belladonna mixture that had temporarily halted my transformation, this ritual might offer something more permanent. Whether Professor Bell's experiments with Hedera had led to this garden of souls, or merely continued an older tradition, I can't let it claim any more victims. Thomas and the others deserve better, and somewhere in this botanical prison might be the answer to what happened to my mother 20 years ago. I promise, I whisper, as I arrange everything according to the diagram. This isn't permanent. It's just buying us time. With trembling hands, I light the final candle and begin to recite the incantation, my voice growing stronger with each unfamiliar word. The greenhouse hums with energy, plants swaying in unison as if caught in an invisible breeze. I am going to save them all. Thomas, the others, myself. Even if it's just the first step in a longer journey toward true freedom. Chapter 6. I stand in the center of the greenhouse, my heart hammering against my ribs as moonlight streams through the glass ceiling. The full moon hangs heavy and bright above, bathing everything in an ethereal silver glow. The plants around me seem to pulse with anticipation, their vines stretching toward me with unmistakable hunger. Professor Bell emerges from the shadows, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. The woman who was once my mentor is barely recognizable now. Her skin takes on a greenish tint, and tiny leaves sprout along her hairline. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, Haylie," she says, her voice carrying an echo that isn't human. "The plants have chosen me. They're going to remake this world." I clutch my satchel containing the components I've prepared. The specialized enzyme solution, the photosynthesis inhibitors, the pH neutralizers I've carefully calibrated. My hands tremble slightly as I check the contents for the 5th time. Methodical preparation. Always be thorough. Mom's voice echoes in my head, a mantra from childhood expeditions when she taught me to catalog specimens. It's a bit ironic. I'm using her teachings to fight the very institution that likely took her from me. My field notebook presses against my hip in my pocket, filled with observations of my own transformation. Even now, facing possible death, I can't stop documenting, analyzing, searching for patterns. It's how I process fear, through data and observation, just like she taught me. The green veins beneath my skin pulse painfully in proximity to Bell. I've calculated I have roughly 47 minutes before the transformation becomes irreversible, before I become like Thomas, conscious but trapped forever in vegetative form, watching centuries pass through immobile eyes. The thought makes my breath catch. I'll never complete my mother's research, never see another sunrise as myself. "What happens to you, Professor Bell?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "You are brilliant. You are going to help people with your research." Part of me, the scientific part that has written meticulous lab notes and dreamed of botanical breakthroughs, understands Bell's fascination. What botanist wouldn't want to communicate with plants? To unlock the secrets of accelerated growth or hybridization. But the cost. I think of Thomas, trapped for over a century in a prison of leaves and sap. Some knowledge isn't worth the price of human dignity. A flicker of the old Professor Bell crosses her face. And I will. Don't you see? Humans are destroying everything. The plants have a better way. They've shown me. As she speaks, tendrils of ivy burst from the soil around her feet, snaking toward me with frightening speed. I jump back, spilling some of the blessed water in a circle around me. The vines hiss and recoil where the droplets touch them. "You're not saving the world," I say, finding my courage. "You're just another person corrupted by power. The plants aren't speaking to you. They're using you." The words taste bitter in my mouth. I'd idolized Belle since I first discovered her work. Her precision, her knowledge, her apparent dedication to ethical research. How many late nights had I spent in the university greenhouse reciting her published papers to wilting specimens? My trust in her feels like another data point in the ongoing experiment of my life. Hypothesis. Authority figures will eventually disappoint you. Finding. Confirmed. Repeatedly. Her face contorts with rage. "You know nothing." She lunges forward, and suddenly we are locked in combat. Her with the strength of the possessed, me with nothing but my knowledge and determination. Vines whip at me from all directions as Belle commands the greenhouse flora with terrible precision. A thorny tendril slashes my arm, drawing blood. I bite my lower lip. This habit has gotten me through countless late-night study sessions and difficult exams. The familiar pressure centers me as I watch the crimson droplets mix with sap. The pain clears my head, sharpens my focus like it does during tricky dissections in lab. This isn't just about surviving anymore. This is about reclaiming the balance. Movement catches my eye. Thomas's massive pitcher plant form has inched closer, his digestive fluids glowing with unusual intensity. "Haylie," his voice whispers in my mind. The specimens respond to genuineness, not dominance, not subservience, partnership. I learned this in my human days. Belle notices my attention shift. "Your friend Thomas is too far gone to help you. He'll be the first to consume you when this is over." But I see the almost imperceptible swaying of Thomas's stalk, a pattern we developed to signal truth versus deception. Belle is lying. Images flash through my mind. Mom's last expedition photos, her careful handwriting in margins of textbooks I've inherited, the empty space at my graduation where she should have stood. The pieces suddenly connect. "She knew, didn't she?" I ask Belle, my voice quavering. "My mother discovered what you were doing years ago." Belle's momentary hesitation tells me everything. The truth crashes into me with shocking force. Mom didn't disappear on an expedition. She was silenced. For a moment, I can't breathe. The greenhouse spins around me as memories cascade. Mom's excitement before that final trip. The way she'd hugged me too tight. Her whispered, "I'm close to something big, Haylie B." I'd been so proud, imagining her discovering some new medicinal plant, never suspecting she'd discovered something far darker. Had she stood exactly where I'm standing now? Here in this cursed Ravenwood? Had she felt the same creeping terror as green lines traced beneath her skin? The thought of her facing this alone makes my heart constrict painfully. But I'm not just my mother's daughter in appearance. I've inherited her scientific mind, her persistence in the face of impossible odds. Just like Mom always said, I whisper to myself. Every specimen tells a story if you know how to listen. I drop to my knees, pressing my bleeding arm to the earth, grief and determination merging into something stronger than either emotion alone. I close my eyes briefly, remembering my mother's research on plant chemical communication pathways. Her diagram of signaling molecules flashes in my mind, the same diagram I've studied until the page became worn. And suddenly I understand. The mixture in my satchel isn't just symbolic. It contains phytochemical signalers that can interrupt Belle's control by resetting the plant's communication network. I drop to my knees, pressing my bleeding arm to the earth. My blood will carry my unique proteins, markers the plants can recognize as authentic rather than manipulated. I uncap the enzyme solution and add 3 drops of my blood, reciting the chemical formula under my breath. Auxin inhibitor, C17H13N. O3 combined with gibberellic acid and melatonin analog. The mixture begins to glow with bioluminescent properties, the same phosphorescent quality I observed in the root systems. I'm not performing mystical ritual. I'm initiating a biochemical cascade, a scientific approach to plant communication. The atmosphere in the greenhouse shifts. The aggressive movement of the plants slows as the chemical signals penetrate their tissues. I observe the physiological responses with my researcher's eye. The electrical impulses visible in the bioluminescent veining. The reorientation of auxin flow directing growth away from me rather than toward me. It's chemical communication happening in real time. Fascinating specimen behavior. Even as my life hangs in the balance, I mentally catalog every reaction, my scientific training kicking in despite my terror. Part of me dissociates into pure scientific observation, the botanist separating from the terrified human. It's a defense mechanism I've relied on since childhood, this ability to retreat into analytical thought when emotions threaten to overwhelm me. I make mental notes for a paper I might never live to write. Anomalous bioluminescence in modified plant specimens demonstrates neural-like network properties consistent with collective consciousness rather than parasitic control. The absurdity of mentally formatting an academic citation while fighting for my life almost makes me laugh hysterically. But this is who I am. Even with death approaching, my curiosity remains insatiable. Fascinating specimens indeed. "What are you doing?" Belle screams, panic in her voice. I continue applying the separation protocol, my voice steadying as I fall into the familiar cadence of scientific certainty. According to my observations, they're exhibiting signs of autonomous consciousness. They don't belong to anyone. They're not weapons or tools. They're living beings with their own evolutionary purpose. The data is quite conclusive on this point. As I speak, I feel something stir within me, an ancient connection flowing through my veins. The spirits of botanists before me, the wisdom of the green world itself. For one terrible moment, nothing happens. The plants remain still, caught between 2 influences. A suffocating silence fills the greenhouse. Then Belle laughs, a sound like branches scraping glass. "You think they'll choose you? I've nurtured them for decades." The largest pitcher plant, the one I now know contains the essence of Professor Bell's great-grandfather, suddenly lurches toward me, its massive trap yawning open. I stumble backward, my elbow knocking over the remaining enzyme solution. The precious liquid soaks wastefully into the soil. "No," I whisper, watching my chances slip away. But as the spilled solution seeps into the ground, an extraordinary thing happens. The greenhouse floor begins to glow with a network of bioluminescent roots, a communication system running beneath the entire structure. My message isn't lost, it's being amplified. But it is too late for Belle. The plants have heard a truer voice, not one that seeks to command them, but one that respects their nature. I stand up, facing my former mentor with pity rather than hatred. It's over, Belle. Let them go. As I watch Belle collapse, I feel the green lines beneath my own skin receding, the unnatural connection fading like a radio losing signal. The temptation of that power, to understand plants on their level, to communicate directly with their ancient consciousness, tugs at my scientific curiosity. For a brief moment, I understand Belle's seduction. To know rather than to theorize, to commune rather than to study. What botanist wouldn't yearn for such connection? But true science, as Mom always insisted, preserves the boundary between observer and observed. The moment you think you own nature, she'd said while showing me how to press flowers without crushing them, is the moment you stop seeing it clearly. People sometimes lose sight of the fact that the act of one observing nature is nature simply observing itself. As the moonlight reaches its limit above us, I complete the ritual and watch as Belle collapses to her knees, the unnatural green fading from her skin as the plants release their hold on her. I have done it. Not through dominance, but through understanding the true power of a botanist, to listen, to respect, and to maintain the balance between worlds. Chapter 7. I stare at the pulsing green heart of the laboratory, my fellowship certificate already feeling like a distant memory. The Blackwood Fellowship acceptance letter is still pinned to my corkboard back in my dorm, the culmination of countless all-nighters and 3 years of perfect grades. I remember how my hands trembled when I opened that envelope, how I'd called Aunt Jen crying with joy. Mom would have been so proud, she'd said. Now here I stand, about to throw it all away. The choice has crystallized in my mind with startling clarity. What good is academic prestige if it comes at the cost of these trapped spirits? I mentally calculate the probability of success. The scientist in me wants more data, more time to perfect the algorithm. But the part of me that remembers my mother's voice saying, "Plants deserve our respect, not our control," knows I can't wait any longer. These aren't just specimens, they're people. Just like Mom might have been. "I'm sorry, Professor," I whisper to the empty lab, knowing she'll soon discover my betrayal. The green lines beneath my skin pulse in response, a network of fine veins mapping my forearms like ivy. Since taking the antidote, they've faded but never completely disappeared, a permanent reminder of what almost happened to me. I feel a strange sensation as I approach the transformation chamber, the plant consciousness within me resonating with those trapped inside, their silent pleas vibrating through my modified cells. My fingers fly across the keyboard, inputting the reverse algorithm I've developed secretly over sleepless nights. The botanical transformation chamber hums with increasing intensity as I reroute power, bypassing the safety protocols. The green lines beneath my skin pulse faster now, a network that connects me to them in ways Professor Bell never anticipated. I bite my lower lip as I concentrate, feeling a strange doubling of consciousness. Part of me remains the methodical scientist, tracking variables and adjusting parameters, while another awareness expands outward, touching the trapped minds within each plant. Their silent pleas flow through me: freedom, release, rest. Just a few more moments, I promise them silently, the way I used to whisper to seedlings in the university greenhouse. According to my observations, this should work. Come on, I mutter, sweat beading on my forehead. The containment system flashes warnings, but I push forward. I've studied the professor's notes thoroughly enough to understand what she's overlooked. The plants aren't just housing spirits, they're prisons for them. The first specimen, a Nepenthes Raja hybrid with unnatural purple venation, begins to tremble. Its modified pitcher, large enough to digest a small mammal, contracts rhythmically. I hold my breath as a soft bioluminescence emanates from the digestive fluid within. Then, like morning dew evaporating under sunrise, a wisp of luminescence separates from the plant. The cellular structure visibly reorganizes, the anthropomorphic features receding as the excess chloroplasts degrade. Within seconds, it's just an ordinary pitcher plant again, its fluid clear rather than the unnatural amber that indicated human essence. The liberated spirit drifts upward, free at last. One by one, I release them all. The Sarracenia pitcher plants deflate like punctured balloons as their spirits depart, their formerly human-like faces in the hood patterns smoothing into natural formations. A Venus flytrap colony releases dozens of tiny sparks that swirl together into a single consciousness, siblings who were transformed together. The massive Amorphophallus titanum in the corner, which never bloomed naturally, suddenly collapses as its artificially rigid structure gives way. The spirit of what I now realize was Professor Bell's predecessor, emerging from its spadix like smoke from a chimney. Some spirits linger momentarily, swirling around me in what feels like gratitude before disappearing. I save Thomas for last. His Victorian pitcher plant form has been my guide, my friend through this nightmare. As I initiate his release sequence, his leaves rustle in a way that sounds almost like speech. Thank you, Miss Dean. The familiar whispery voice reaches my mind. A century is quite enough. I'll miss you, I admit, surprised by the tears stinging my eyes. And I you. But this is right. Remember us, but do not mourn. We go to where we belong. The largest spirit emerges from Thomas's plant body, briefly forming a silhouette that resembles a man in old-fashioned gardener's clothes, tipping his hat to me before dissipating upward. When the last spirit departs, I collapse into the professor's chair, exhausted but filled with a profound sense of rightness. My academic career is over, my comfortable future gone. But as I watch the final traces of ethereal light fade away, I know I've chosen the only path I can live with. I pull Mom's worn field journal from my backpack, flipping to the page I discovered last night. There, in her meticulous handwriting, were observations from her last expedition. Discovered evidence of soul containment in the Bell family greenhouse specimens. The ethical implications are staggering. Must confront Madeline immediately. The date was 3 days before her accident. My hands tremble as they did 5 years ago at her memorial service. All these years, I'd imagined her dying among exotic plants in some remote jungle, pursuing the knowledge she loved. The truth hits me with physical force. She died right here, probably in this very lab, because she stood up for what was right. I trace her handwriting, remembering how she used to let me help organize her field notes when I was little. Scientific discovery without ethical consideration isn't progress, Haylie, she'd told me once. It's just clever cruelty. I hadn't fully understood then. I do now. Below that, a formula, the very formula I'd adapted for my algorithm, with a single line. In case of emergency, the separation must be initiated at the quantum cellular level, breaking the supernatural bonds without harming the natural organism. She knew. She'd discovered Bell's horrible secret years ago and paid with her life. I run my fingers over her handwriting, understanding finally why I was really offered this fellowship. Belle had recognized my mother's daughter and wanted to finish what she'd started. Plants speak to those who listen, Mom had written on the journal's first page. Respectfully, patiently, without trying to bend them to human will. A soft ping from my phone breaks the silence, a text from Professor Bell. Lab alarm triggered. Everything all right? Before I can decide whether to respond, the lab's security system gives a warning beep. On the monitor, I can see Bell's car pulling into the parking lot. Worse, the remaining plants in the adjacent greenhouse, those not part of the transformation experiments, begin moving unnaturally, vines slithering across the floor toward the lab door like serpents. Belle's psychic connection to the botanical network is alerting her plants. I have minutes, maybe seconds. I don't respond to her text. Instead, I gather my research notes and flash drive containing evidence of what has really been happening in this laboratory. The University Ethics Board will need to see this, whatever the personal cost to me. As I step outside into the cool night air, something unexpected happens. A single glowing wisp, one of the spirits I've freed, hovers near me. It hasn't departed with the others. I thought you'd all gone, I murmur. The spirit dances around me, then settles briefly on my mother's journal before rising again. In that moment, understanding washes over me like a wave. Mom hadn't just been studying plant communication. She'd known about the spirits too. But unlike Belle, she'd respected their autonomy, their right to exist freely. I'm not destroying her legacy tonight. I'm fulfilling it. Thank you, I whisper as the spirit finally drifts away toward the botanical gardens. The reality of what I've done hits me suddenly. The Blackwood Fellowship, gone. My perfect academic record, destroyed. Letters of recommendation for graduate programs, up in smoke. 3 years of work toward my botanical research career has vanished in a single night. My apartment is university housing tied to the fellowship. By this time tomorrow, I'll likely be homeless, jobless, and academically disgraced. I pause under a streetlight, watching my shadow stretch across the pavement. 5 years of meticulous planning, of proving myself worthy of Mom's scientific legacy, all of it sacrificed in a moment of ethical clarity. Aunt Jen will be devastated when she hears. But as I consider alternatives, continuing Belle's work, pretending not to know, becoming complicit, I realize there was never really a choice at all. Mom didn't raise me to be successful at any cost. She raised me to be someone who could look at herself in the mirror each morning. Fascinating specimen, I whisper to myself with a sad smile, echoing my favorite phrase. That's what I've been to Belle all along, just another specimen to manipulate. And yet, watching that last spirit disappear into the night sky, I can't bring myself to regret it. Some prices are worth paying. Tomorrow will bring interrogations, probably expulsion. My carefully planned future has evaporated. But as I walk away from the lab, I feel lighter than I have in years. Mom would have been proud. And for the first time since her death, I'm proud of myself too. Chapter 8. I wake before dawn, my body still adjusting to life after the ritual. Through my window, I can see the fog rolling in from the Bay of Fundy, shrouding Ravenwood's grounds in ghostly white. My arm bears a thin green scar where the vines once penetrated my skin, a permanent reminder of how close I came to becoming another specimen in Belle's collection. Some mornings, I trace the scar with my fingertips, the raised tissue a roadmap of my journey. Just like Mom always said, I whisper to myself, recalling her words about how fieldwork always leaves its mark on a botanist, though I doubt she meant quite so literally. The physical reminders go beyond the scar. Sometimes my fingers tingle when I touch certain plants, as if some cellular memory remains. I wake gasping from dreams where vines consume me from within, where I'm trapped watching my body photosynthesize. The university-appointed therapist calls it post-traumatic stress. She doesn't know that occasionally, when rain drums against the greenhouse at twilight, I still hear whispers that shouldn't exist. Faint, like radio static between stations, but unmistakable. Dr. Winters prescribed meditation techniques. I haven't told her that when I close my eyes to meditate, I sometimes feel roots spreading from my feet, anchoring me to earth. Part of me wonders if these sensations are real, or if my mind is struggling to process what happened. The scientific part of me wants to document every anomaly, measure the frequency of these episodes, establish control variables. But another part, the part that stood in that greenhouse and felt plants choosing me over Belle, knows some experiences defy clinical categorization. According to my observations, I'm caught between worlds now, too scientific to embrace mysticism, too altered to dismiss it entirely. The greenhouse looks different now, cleansed of supernatural influence, but no less fascinating through my botanist's eyes. Morning light refracts through condensation droplets as the coastal air meets the warmth inside, casting rainbow spectrums across tillandsia varieties arranged by phylogenetic relationship. Pitcher plants, ordinary nepenthes and sarracenia, not their consciousness-infused counterparts, trap insects through evolutionary adaptation rather than malevolent purpose. Their digestive enzymes break down prey through elegant biochemistry, not human souls bound to vegetative matter. I catch myself studying my reflection in the greenhouse glass. The ambitious second-year student who arrived from the University of New Brunswick with color-coded research proposals and dreams of academic prestige seems like a stranger now. Her plans were so linear: fellowship, doctorate, publication, tenure. Now my path meanders like a vine seeking light, adapting to obstacles rather than forcing my way through them. Mom would recognize this version of me, I think. She always said the best botanists let the plants teach them, rather than imposing human expectations. I catalog these observations in meticulous field notes, vascular bundles in monocot stems arranged in complex patterns, stomata opening and closing in response to the high humidity levels typical of the Fundy Coast, mycorrhizal relationships forming between fungal networks and plant roots. The science remains breathtaking without Bell's perversions. As I adjust the mineral content for a particularly finicky Dionea muscipula specimen, I appreciate its snap-trap mechanism as natural engineering perfection, not an echo of human imprisonment. This perspective, seeing plants as themselves rather than vessels for something else, feels like rediscovering my discipline's true purpose. Good morning, I murmur to the orchids. It feels right to speak to them, even knowing they can't understand me now. Some habits die hard. I arrange a meeting with the University Ethics Board this afternoon. The evidence sits heavily in my backpack. Bell's journals, my recordings, photos of the transformation chamber. Everything they'll need to understand what happened here. The drive to Fredericton campus will take nearly 2 hours, but it's worth it to finally close this chapter. When campus security arrived yesterday, Professor Bell didn't resist. She was barely recognizable. The ritual has left her skin pallid, almost translucent, with faint green veins visible at her temples. Brown spots mottle her hands like dying leaves, but it's her eyes that haunt me, once bright with zealous purpose, now clouded and vacant, like a plant pulled from nutrient-rich soil and left in darkness. Her movements are brittle, stems deprived of water. Something has changed fundamentally in her physiology, as if the separation from plant consciousness damaged her on a cellular level. She doesn't just look defeated, she looks withered. I was like you once, she says quietly. Idealistic, I can hate her for what she did to those spirits, for what she tried to do to me. But standing in this greenhouse now, I understand how seduction works. The whispered promises of botanical breakthrough, of communion with nature in ways no scientist had achieved before. I'll take care of them, I promise her, as the officers guide her toward the waiting car. The plants, the proper way. The university hasn't decided what to do with Ravenwood Estate yet. Legal battles will likely tie it up for years. But I've already spoken with the botany department chair about establishing ethical guidelines for the greenhouse's future. No more experiments pushing beyond natural boundaries. No more attempts to bind what should remain free. I've become something of a guardian here, though the transition wasn't smooth. The first month after the ritual, I avoided the greenhouse entirely, spending days in my dorm room with blinds drawn, ignoring calls from the botany department. The nightmares were relentless, vines erupting from my chest, Belle's face morphing into my mother's, Thomas dissolving into nothing. Professor Winters from Plant Sciences found me, eventually. "These specimens need someone who understands what happened," she said, placing a potted African violet on my desk. "Just start with one." That single plant became my lifeline. Caring for something straightforward and uncomplicated gave my hands purpose when my mind couldn't focus. One plant became 3, then 7. By week 6, I returned to the greenhouse, trembling at first, senses hyper-alert for whispers that no longer existed. I developed a system. 15 minutes inside, then a break. 30 minutes, then a break. The routine expanded gradually until I could spend hours among the plants without panic clawing at my throat. Protection evolved from fear to responsibility. Not because these plants need protection from supernatural forces anymore, but because they need protection from us, from human ambition and scientific overreach. This morning, as sunlight filters through the Victorian glass panels and the distant foghorn from the Fundy Bay Lighthouse echoes across the grounds, I begin the daily routine. Watering, pruning, checking soil pH. Simple, honest work, the way it should have been all along. The harsh New Brunswick winter means additional heating systems for the greenhouse, but the summer brings spectacular growing conditions as daylight stretches past 9 p.m. I've spent the last 3 months transforming Ravenwood's greenhouse. In my office, what was once Belle's sanctuary, I've placed a framed photo of Mom. She smiles from beside a rare Amazonian pitcher plant, field notebook in hand. Sometimes I talk to her while documenting the day's work, filling pages in a journal that mirrors hers in everything but purpose. "You tried to stop this years ago," I whisper to her image. "I finally finished what you started." For years after Mom disappeared, I'd constructed elaborate fantasies about her secret research mission, imagining her deep in uncharted rainforests making breakthrough discoveries. I'd studied botany to follow in her footsteps, to make her proud when she inevitably returned. The truth, that she died trying to stop Belle's experiments, hollowed out those childish dreams, but gave me something more valuable: purpose. The closure isn't clean, grief rarely is, but knowing she died trying to prevent Belle's experiments gives her absence a meaning it lacked before. I'm continuing her real work now, protecting the boundary between scientific discovery and exploitation. Sometimes I wonder if she felt the same conflict I did. The temptation to push boundaries weighed against ethical responsibility. Did she ever hear the plants whisper? Did she struggle with the line between scientific breakthrough and moral transgression? I run my fingers across her field journal, the one I recovered from Belle's hidden files. Mom's meticulous handwriting fills the margins with observations that dance between objective science and something approaching reverence. "Fascinating specimen," she wrote beside sketches of plants that would later contain human spirits. She saw their wonder before Belle perverted it. That's the legacy I'm trying to honor. The University of New Brunswick has been supportive, despite everything. My advisors visit monthly from the campus in Fredericton, amazed at how I've transformed Belle's macabre collection into a legitimate research facility. They eventually grant me custodianship. Temporarily, they emphasize, but I've stopped counting days. This place has become my sanctuary as much as I've made it one for the plants. Today, I'm installing the new irrigation system, designed to mimic natural rainfall patterns. My hands are caked with soil as I carefully position the tubing around the roots of a temperamental bromeliad. There you go, I whisper, an old habit that feels right despite everything. The brass plaque by the entrance reads, Ravenwood Botanical Sanctuary, a space for ethical research and conservation. Below it, in smaller lettering, in remembrance of those who were lost. Most visitors assume it refers to endangered plant species. Only a handful of us know the truth. I've added a section dedicated to native New Brunswick species, plants that thrived along the Fundy Coast long before Ravenwood existed. Their resilience against the dramatic tides and harsh coastal conditions makes them fascinating subjects for ethical research. On clear days, I take breaks to walk the cliff path overlooking the Bay of Fundy. Watching the world's highest tides transform the landscape twice daily reminds me that nature operates on its own magnificent scale, without human intervention. I visit the small cemetery behind Ravenwood monthly, nestled between ancient pines characteristic of the southern New Brunswick coast. Thomas Wheeler's headstone, erected by his family in 1902 when he disappeared, stands beneath a massive sugar maple. I planted a small ordinary pitcher plant beside it last autumn, not to contain him, but to honor him. During the ritual when the spirits were released, Thomas's essence lingered the longest. I've been waiting for this for 120 years, he whispered, his voice now just rustling leaves. Thank you for seeing me, Haylie Dean. Unlike the others who dissolved into mist, Thomas coalesced into a warm golden light that hovered briefly before sinking into the earth. Finding peace, I hope. I've researched the other names from Belle's journals: Earl Atkins, Marilyn Short, Maria Delgoon, placing memorial markers where official graves never existed, ensuring someone remembers they were more than Bell family experiments. Professor Bell's trial begins next month. I'll testify, of course. The prosecution has my journals, recordings, and photographs. What they don't have, what I can't give them, is how it feels to hear the plant's consciousness fade during the reversal ritual, their voices growing distant until they are simply plants again. Some nights I still dream of their whispers. The investigation never located Mr. Thorne. The night gardener vanished after Bell's arrest, his cottage emptied of personal belongings. University records showed no employment contract, no payment history. Bell refuses to discuss him, though her expression darkens whenever his name arises during questioning. I found a single reference in her oldest journal. Thorne remains useful, though increasingly unpredictable. The symbiosis has progressed further than anticipated. Sometimes I glimpse movement at the greenhouse periphery, a tall figure slipping between shadows, gone when I turn. Campus security finds nothing during their sweeps, but occasionally I discover freshly turned soil around certain plants, evidence of nocturnal tending I didn't perform. I've installed motion-activated cameras throughout the greenhouse. They malfunction with suspicious frequency, particularly on foggy nights when the mist from the bay seems to seep through the very walls of Ravenwood. My graduate studies have taken an unexpected turn. The department approved my dissertation on ethical boundaries in botanical research, case studies in conservation. I'm developing benchmarks and standards for working with rare specimens that honors their existence without exploitation. It's not the groundbreaking work Bell promised, but it feels honest. My Blackwood Fellowship certificate arrived last week, the prestigious award that once consumed my ambitions. I hung it in the greenhouse bathroom, where humidity has already begun curling its edges. Oh, the irony. I achieved the career-defining credential I desperately wanted, but through a path I never could have imagined. The young woman who arrived at Ravenwood 6 months ago, laptop filled with research proposals, mind fixed on academic prominence, feels like a stranger now. She wanted to make her mark on botanical science. I'm content ensuring science doesn't leave devastating marks on the botanical world. Some might view this as stepping back from ambition, but I see it differently. I've simply recognized which legacy matters. My strong moral compass, the trait Aunt Jen always said I inherited from Mom, ultimately guided me when scientific curiosity might have led me astray. I understand Bell's temptation now, the allure of discovery that pushes beyond established boundaries. There were moments during my transformation when I felt the plant's consciousness merging with mine, when I glimpsed knowledge no botanist had ever accessed. The power was intoxicating. But power without ethical framework becomes destruction. Mom knew that. Thomas knew that. And now, finally, so do I. Students visit twice weekly now, undergrads mostly, wide-eyed and curious. I teach them to approach the greenhouse with reverence, not because anything supernatural remains, but because respect for living things should be the foundation of scientific inquiry. I've integrated my scientific training into this new approach. My work tables display both traditional botanical texts and my own research into plant communication pathways. I show students how auxins travel through tissue, demonstrating chemical signaling without anthropomorphizing it. We measure growth rates, document phototropism, and analyze soil microbiology, all standard scientific practices, but conducted with heightened awareness of ethical boundaries. Science isn't about imposing our will on nature, I tell them, pointing to cellular diagrams I've drawn comparing plant and animal nervous systems. It's about developing methodologies that reveal natural processes without disrupting them. I've developed non-invasive sensing equipment with engineering students, devices that measure minute electrical impulses in plant tissue without damaging a single cell. The readings are fascinating. Definitive evidence of sophisticated responses without attributing human consciousness to them. This is the delicate balance, acknowledging plant complexity through rigorous science while respecting fundamental differences between our kingdoms. Plants communicate in their own way, I tell them, demonstrating how the mimosa pudica folds its leaves at my touch. We don't need to force them into our language to understand their value. Sometimes when I'm alone at dusk, watering the night-blooming cereus, I imagine I hear echoes of what once was, not the spirits themselves, but the memory of connection, a reminder of what happens when we push too far beyond natural boundaries. The greenhouse transforms at twilight. Shadows stretch like grasping fingers across terracotta pots. Water droplets on leaves catch the fading light, resembling eyes watching from every corner. The humidity wraps around my throat like a living thing, and pipes groan beneath floorboards with almost vocal inflections. I know it's just physics now, temperature changes causing materials to expand and contract. But my body remembers differently. It remembers sentient vines and conscious roots. Last week, during a thunderstorm, power flickered throughout campus. In those seconds of darkness, I swear the ferns rustled without breeze, their fronds curling inward like beckoning fingers. A trick of perception, nothing more. Yet I found myself frozen, heart hammering against ribs, until fluorescent light sputtered back to life. The rational scientist in me documents these moments clinically in my journal. Persistent hypersensitivity to normal plant movements, likely due to trauma response. The part of me that lived through Belle's ritual keeps pruning shears in my pocket, just in case. I'm healing, like the greenhouse itself. The plants grow stronger under proper care. The university has funded renovations for the cracked panes and rusted fixtures. And I've found purpose in this unexpected role. Guardian, teacher, steward of a place where nature and humanity can coexist without one consuming the other. Belle was wrong about the method, but not about everything. There is magic in this relationship between humans and plants, not in binding spirits or forcing consciousness, but in the quiet miracle of photosynthesis, in the resilience of a seedling pushing through soil, in the ancient dance of pollination. That's the story I tell now. That's the legacy I'm building from the ruins of Belle's ambition. Last week, I caught a research assistant from the chemistry department collecting samples from the West Wing. Soil, leaf cuttings, water from the central pool. When confronted, she mentioned a special project for Professor Harlow, studying the unique microbial properties of Ravenwood's ecosystem. I recognized the hungry look in her eyes, the same gleam Belle once had. After escorting her out, I spent the night checking every plant, every corner of the greenhouse. Nothing seemed disturbed, yet something felt wrong. Near dawn, I found it. A tiny recording device wedged between potted orchids, still transmitting. The university wants to believe the horror ended with Belle's arrest, but I know better. Scientific curiosity is relentless. The temptation to cross ethical boundaries for breakthrough discovery remains. Belle wasn't an anomaly. She was a warning. I've started keeping new records, names, departments, suspicious inquiries. The greenhouse's protection requires vigilance. Some nights I patrol the perimeter, listening for whispers that shouldn't exist, watching for shadows moving independently of their plants. This isn't over. Perhaps it never will be. But I'm ready. I stand in the center of the greenhouse, morning light filtering through the Victorian glass panels as the sun rises over the Bay of Fundy, and I feel something close to peace. Not the ambitious drive that brought me here, not the terror that nearly destroyed me, but something steadier. Purpose. The plants surrounding me are simply plants now, complex, fascinating, worthy of study and protection on their own terms without supernatural interference. And perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that applies to everything. The end.